Hello and welcome to another episode of Twice as Lively with Ken Heckenlively. That would be me, your host. And as always, I have my delicious Pete's coffee with me because we're going to take that simultaneous sip. What kind of coffee do I have? I have a cafe Americano with a little bit of room for cream and honey because we all need a little bit of sugar with our caffeine. So get ready for that simultaneous sip. It may be the most bracing thing in your day, or the most bracing thing may be the title of this episode. Agreeable people make the best Nazis. That's right. Agreeable people make the best Nazis. But before I get into that, let's take that simultaneous sip. Here we are. Get ready for it. Caffeine engaged, brain turning on. Okay, so the title of this episode is Agreeable People Make the Best Nazis. So, how am I going to prove that point? And when you get finished with this broadcast, will you say to yourselves, wow, I learned something really important? How is it that agreeable people are most likely to fall victim to a totalitarian ideology and commit the greatest crimes? Well, we're going to go over that today. But I'll start with a little bit of a story, which is there's a nice little smoothie place in my little town just across the street. The people there are just lovely. Aside from the fact that sometimes machines don't work, it's a great place to go. It has this wonderful vibe. And so they're very agreeable. Now, today, when I went to get my smoothie, I saw on the counter this sticker for the East Bay Democratic Socialists of America, asking me to join the fight against fascism, join the fight for economic and social justice. You see, they're nice people, but they're supporting Nazis. Did you know, boys and girls, that Nazis stands for National Socialists? How is that much different than Democratic Socialists? Well, I'll leave that to others. But let me just say, there's something uncomfortably similar between Democratic Socialists of America and National Socialists of Germany. I don't like Democratic Socialists. I hope you don't either. Okay, so my whole thrust of today's broadcast is about how agreeableness leads people into error and injustice and horrible, horrible crimes. And this may sound counterintuitive because we like to think that agreeable people are hospitable people. But the truth may be that agreeableness may have an Achilles heel, and we may need to be aware of one of the pitfalls of being a very agreeable person. Now, why is this important, and how does this get into the relationships between men and women? Well, here's something that science has uncovered. Women are far more agreeable than men. Women are much more susceptible to falling into cult-like behavior because that's what cults rely on. Cults rely on you being agreeable. More women are agreeable than men. Disagreeableness is much higher in men on average than it is in women. Let's go to some of the science. I did a little bit of a search on Copilot. Let's look at what agreeableness is and how it can often be a good thing, but it can often lead people into really negative behavior. So, an overview of agreeableness. Agreeableness is a core dimension of the Big Five personality model, encompassing traits such as trust, altruism, compliance, and tenderness. Individuals high in agreeableness tend to prioritize social harmony, avoid conflict, and consider others' needs, whereas those low in agreeableness are more competitive, skeptical, and self interested. So, let me talk about agreeableness that I observed in 20 years as a public school teacher. What I observed is that the girls were far more agreeable than the boys, meaning that whatever I asked them to do, they would generally rush to complete it in exactly the way I wanted it done. And they sought my favor in a way that the boys did not. It was very common for at least a couple of boys in the class, when an assignment was given, to kind of fold their arms and go, why should I do this? That is a great trait to avoid falling into cult-like behavior. I often joked that if I told the class in order to get an A, they needed to go stand in the corner on their heads, 90% of the girls would do that. And only about 30% of the boys would do that. 10% of the girls and about 60% of the boys would go, that's stupid. Okay? So that's the problem. If you're agreeable, you will tend to favor social cohesion, and you don't want to avoid conflict. If somebody asks you to do something stupid, if you're very agreeable, that means you're likely to do it. And that's the problem. And so, if you look at the differences between men and women, women favor social cohesion, the avoidance of conflict. Men don't prioritize that as highly. What they want to know is whether something makes sense. So let's look at our current society. I would say that for at least 20 to 25 years, the value of men has been disparaged in our society. What that leaves young women doing is joining together in groups that may not be very good. They don't have the ultimate well-being of society in focus. And so I've noticed this really disturbing trend among young women. And I just have to say it because in the past week or so, I've seen about 3 or 4 instances with young women in their 20s and 30s, which really makes me worried for their long-term prospects of happiness. what I see among these young women is a disparagement of their fathers. Now, the fathers are my friends, and they kind of run the gamut. Some of my friends are divorced, most are still married, but all of the men, at least to my way of looking at it, are really good guys. They want the best for their kids, and they've always been there for their kids. What I see among the young women is this really weird pattern of really not engaging with their fathers in an adult fashion. Indeed, these women in their 20s and 30s seem like 12-year-olds for the way that they understand men. In other words, these young women today have scowls on their faces and seem to have no time or respect for their fathers, which I think really leads to problems when they want to have relations with men their own age. In other words, if you don't respect a man, how can you have a relationship with a man? I would say the same thing when 50 or 60 years ago, women were disparaged. I don't think that young men growing up in a society which disparages women is going to create men who actively engage with women. So we need a level playing field, an understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of both men and women. The past 20 to 25 years, it's really sucked to be a man because men, as depicted in film, literature, TV, the popular culture, they're just not well depicted. And I think that this leads to a lot of problems. I don't think it is a coincidence that as the role of men and the importance of men has been diminished, that there is a rise in political tribalism. See, I don't think that men are as tribal as women. Men tend to look at people more as individuals than women who tend to be more clannish. I think that there are far many lone wolves among males than there are among females. It's just part of our nature. Think back to when you were a young person. If you are a female, the worst thing that could be said about you is that you're different from the rest of the group. But if you're a young man, the worst thing that can be said about you is that you're just like everybody else. Men don't want to be cookie cutters. They want to be unique. They want to be strong individuals. Women don't want to stick out when they're younger. Okay. And while this is something that really happens when you're young, it used to be that women, as they got older and they started interacting with men in positive relationships, would come to understand that there was more to the world than just the female perspective. They understood that there were multiple ways of looking at the world, And if you talk to women of a certain age, and they would discuss what they liked about their relationships with men, they would tend to say things like, it uncomplicates the world for me. I worried about a lot more things that I did. I worried about a lot more things in the past when I didn't have strong male relationships. And now my relationship with that good man tells them that they don't have to worry about as many things. I think that's also why anxiety, mood orders, and depression are so high among young women today. They're high because those women are not having good relations with men. You women need to have good relations with men in order for their natural anxiety to go down. Now, what's the danger for men if they're not in a good relationship with a woman? Well, they can tend to be lone wolves for longer than they should be. It's important for that lone wolf nature of a man to be integrated to a good societal purpose. Now, we see negative behaviors among young men. I mean, I would tend to say that individuals like Andrew Tate are examples of a man who has not integrated himself into the greater society. He can say a lot of things which strike young men as empowering, but ultimately, I think he fails the test of being a good leader for young men. Similarly, I look at figures like Nick Fuentes, and I'm troubled because when I listen to Nick Fuentes, all I hear is a young, angry virgin. Yes, we know that Nick Fuentes is famously a virgin. And some people may think that's a great thing. Some people may say, well, don't have sex until marriage. And I can understand that point of view. But there's also something about a young man who's never had a good, full relationship with a woman, which makes him a little bit of a danger. And when I listen to Nick Fuentes, behind his commentary, I just sense this really destructive anger. It seems like it's a destructive anger mainly at young women, but because he's never had the full experience of a relationship with a woman, you can't just go after women and not hurt men. So, in my estimation, Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes are two sides of the same coin. It is unbridled male energy with no softening from the female side. For those who think that Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes are dangerous to us as a society, I understand that. And I agree with that. Can there be things that they say which have value and merit? Absolutely. I don't believe any person is an angel who should always be listened to. I don't believe that any person is a devil who should never be listened to. However, I will make my concerns known to them. If I was speaking directly to Andrew Tate, I would say to him, Andrew, have you ever loved a woman? I know you've slept with a lot of women, but have you ever loved a woman so much that you would give up your life for her? Have you ever loved a woman so deeply that you would stand by her if she had something like cancer? Have you ever loved a woman so much that you would not only give her a child, of which I know you have given many women children, but are you assisting in the raising of that child? Does that child know you? What if that child has developmental problems? What if they have physical handicaps? Are you there, Andrew, for those who need you? Are you there, Andrew, for those lives that you've created? I think the answer is no, you are not. To Nick Fuentes, it's clear to me that you have never loved a woman. And so I detect a certain harshness to you. I detect a certain anger and rage in you. And that makes me scared. I'm scared of any person who has not loved so deeply that they would give their life for another. Notice, I'm not talking about division here. I'm asking how we can become more harmonious with each other. I am concerned by division. I don't like division. If I see division, I see a force which looks to harm the human race. I am unalterably opposed to any force, human or supernatural, which seeks the destruction of the human race. And I think you should be as well. So these are some of the negative things I have seen, but I did want to take some time and talk about some positive developments. So I've talked a little bit about the Spider-Man movie, Brand New Day, which is breaking all sorts of records. And I just have to say to you, it's doing a good job at putting us back together. Why is it doing a good job of putting us back together? Well, there's Peter Parker, the white dude. What's the white dude doing? Well, he made a big sacrifice in the last movie because he was putting people in harm's way and he had a spell cast which made them forget him. So nobody in his life knew who he was. They didn't know he was a Spider-Man. Well, in the new movie, that's a problem because he's become a man with only a job and no relationships. And I don't want to spoil the movie for you, although probably 100 million of you have already seen it, so you already know what I'm talking about. But there is a reconnection that happens in Spider-Man Brand New Day between Peter Parker, the white dude, his girlfriend, MJ, who's half black, and his good friend, Ned, who's Filipino. Does any of that matter in the movie? No, it doesn't. They are just people who like Peter Parker. He happens to be white. MJ happens to be half black. And Ned happens to be Filipino. And that has absolutely no effect on their feelings for each other, which is exactly how it should be. Now, the next movie I'm going to talk about, I have to say, is my favorite film of the summer. It's The End of Oak Street, which I've seen twice now. Why have I seen it twice? Well, first of all, as you can probably tell, I love dinosaurs. So anytime there's a dinosaur movie, I'm going to see it a couple times. Yes, I saw Primitive War a couple times. And even the last lame Jurassic World movie I saw twice. End of Oak Street is awesome because not only are the dinosaurs really cool, but there's a great message about the importance of families. So you've got Anne Hathaway as the mom, Ewan McGregor as the dad, and as the movie starts, they're having some problems. Mom is dreaming about running away to New York to be a writer. Dad is struggling with his job. He's been laid off. He's delivering pizzas to get a little bit extra money, and you can just see the tension rising. So then this big event happens where their neighborhood gets sent back to dinosaur times, and the family has to work together. Now, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there is a great sense in that film that both mom and dad will fight for like hell for their family and for each other. There's this wonderful sequence where an Allosaurus is chasing after the kids, and dad does something to get the Allosaurus's attention. And then the Allosaurus goes after dad. And then mom does something to get the Allosaurus away from the dad. And then the Allosaurus is chasing the mom. And then the dad does something to get the Allosaurus away from the mom. And I'm not going to spoil it for you what happens then. But there's also a wonderful Back to the Future type twist in the film that I did not see coming. And this is something that has been annoying the crap out of me about how so many movies are sucking about time travel and the importance of it. What am I talking about? Yes, I'm talking about that film, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which if Steven Spielberg had made one single change to that movie, it would have been a huge blockbuster. So here's why Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny absolutely sucked. It sucked because at the beginning of the film, Indiana Jones is lamenting the death of his son, his only child, in Vietnam. Because of this, he is estranged from his wife, the love of his life. And in the course of the movie, he engages in a time travel experience where he ends up going back to ancient Sicily to meet, what is it? It's not Archimedes, it's Aristotle, I believe. Okay, so it's great, right? And the Nazis are there, blah, 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 all this stuff going on. And I'm watching this exciting adventure and I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, that's all great and everything. I love it. But what about the son who died in Vietnam? You're on this great big adventure. How is it that this adventure is going to bring you back your son who died in Vietnam? They talk about it. The movie ends and they say, yeah, there's no way to stop our son from dying in Vietnam. And that's it. And I said to myself, wait a minute. We go to movies to learn how to live our lives more fully, how to keep life going. And at the end of that movie, it's just a bunch of old wrinkly dudes with no kids. I'm like, where is the next generation? This sucks. I want Indiana Jones to go on into the future. And you tell me you can go back to ancient Sicily, fight Nazis, and you still can't bring your son back? That sucks. That's why that movie bombed. End of Oak Street. I just cannot recommend highly enough because it gives you everything you want in a summer movie. Go see it once, go see it twice, go see it 3 times. It's really that fun. So, Andrew Breitbart was famous for saying that culture is downstream of politics. I believe we have turned the corner on this anti male philosophy, which has been harming so many young women and so many young men. I think the generation of young men and women who are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, I think you guys are being set up to have wonderful lives because you understand women are important. Women have a unique way of looking at the world, but so do men. And if you want to be a fully integrated person, if you are a woman, you have to fully understand the male perspective. If you are a dude, you need to fully understand the female perspective. Human beings survive and thrive because we recognize the value of both men and women. So, how about no more of this girl power shit? How about no more of this girl boss crap? How about just people boss? How about people are great? Okay. Can we stop with the women in STEM because we're leaving the men behind? How about treating both males and females the same? And please, please stop discriminating against young men. Please stop saying terrible things about toxic masculinity. Why do we have this phrase, toxic masculinity, and we don't talk about toxic femininity? This seems completely wrong to me. It also seems really harmful. It's leading to division, it's leading to hate, and it makes it easier for young women and young men to join cults like the Democratic Socialists of America and become a destructive force to society. In the Bible, it says, by your fruits you shall know them. When I see young women not respecting their fathers, and I see the harm it's doing to those young women in their relationships, I say something terrible has gone on. And I will not be agreeable and just let that continue. I will be disagreeable and I will point that out. And if it makes people mad, so be it. But I know in being disagreeable, I might just be changing the lives of a number of young men and a number of young women. And so that's why I do it. So hopefully, this is not the best part of your day. Hopefully, the best part of your day is having relationships with people in the real world. That means sitting across from the table from them, talking, not looking at your phones. Find out what's good about the people around you, because there is so much that's good. Thanks, and have a great day.